Oliver Brooks was late again, balancing a half-tied sneaker on one foot, a wriggling 5-year-old on his hip, and a lukewarm paper cup of coffee in his free hand. He shoved open the glass door of the downtown cafe with his shoulder, nearly tripping over the stroller parked just outside. "Daddy, you forgot my applesauce," Naomi huffed, arms crossed like a miniature CEO, her pink backpack slipping off one shoulder. "Sweetheart, I'll buy you an entire orchard if we can just make it to preschool before Miss Parker calls CPS," Oliver muttered, adjusting her on his hip and stepping forward and crashing straight into a woman in a white blazer. Coffee exploded between them, dark and steaming, soaking her blouse, dripping down his arm. Naomi shrieked. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," Oliver gasped, setting Naomi down and grabbing napkins from the counter. "I didn't see you. I was trying to hear. Please, let me." The woman didn't move. She blinked, then looked down at the brown stain spreading across her chest, slowly lifting her eyes to meet his. She was stunning, ridiculously stunning. High cheekbones, glossy dark hair pulled into a sleek twist, and eyes the color of storm clouds, calm, unreadable but definitely not amused. "I just ruined your dry clean only everything, didn't I?" Oliver said, still blotting at her sleeve like his dignity wasn't already bleeding out on the floor. "You did," she said flatly, taking a napkin from him. Naomi peeked around his leg. "I think you look pretty." Even with the coffee. The woman's lips curved slightly, just a flicker, but it was there. Oliver crouched beside his daughter. "Naomi, what do we say when daddy body checks a stranger with caffeine?" Naomi sighed. "Sorry." The woman crouched too, eye level with the little girl. "I accept your apology." Oliver stood again, running a hand through his messy chestnut hair. "Please let me pay for your dry cleaning, or buy you a shirt, or I don't know, a new wardrobe. I'm fine," she said, brushing past him toward the counter. He followed her anyway. "Seriously, let me at least get your coffee. I owe you that much." She glanced at him, then at Naomi, who was now investigating the pastry display with intense interest. "One coffee," she said. "Fine." Oliver ordered for both of them, ignoring his dwindling bank account and the fact that he was supposed to be at the construction site 10 minutes ago. She took a seat by the window and he hesitated before joining her. Naomi perched on his lap. "I'm Oliver," he offered. "And this little tornado is Naomi." "Talia," she said. "Talia Ford." The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. "You always take your kid to meetings?" she asked, sipping the latte like it didn't just cost him half a tank of gas. "No," he said. "Just when I can't afford a babysitter, or when her preschool decides today's the day to hold a parental involvement breakfast." Talia tilted her head. "And you're a single dad, construction worker, sometimes handyman. Full-time disaster." She looked at him for a long second, then said, "Well, at least you're honest." Naomi tugged on her blazer. "Are you a princess?" Oliver's face turned red. "Naomi." Talia laughed, a real one this time. "No, but I do sit through a lot of boring meetings and wear uncomfortable shoes, so close." Naomi nodded solemnly. "That sounds awful." Oliver chuckled, relaxing for the first time all morning. They sat like that for a few minutes, him explaining the difference between a hammer drill and a regular one, Naomi asking too many questions, and Talia listening. He didn't notice the time until his phone buzzed with a message from his boss. "Shoot, I'm late," he said, standing quickly and lifting Naomi onto his hip. "Thank you for not suing me," he added with a sheepish grin. "Thanks for the coffee," Talia replied, eyes lingering on him longer than necessary. As he turned to leave, she called out, "Hey, Oliver." He looked back. "Try not to spill coffee on any more billionaires today," he blinked. "Wait, what?" But she was already gone. Talia Ford stepped into the back of her town car, her assistant waiting with a fresh blouse. "You okay, ma'am?" the driver asked. She smiled, still feeling the warmth of that scruffy dad's laugh in her chest. "I'm fine, Brian, just change of plans. I don't want to go to the office." "Where to?" She looked out the window. "Find out where Naomi's preschool is. I think I'd like to make a donation." Oliver thought it was a prank when the preschool director called later that afternoon. "You have a full scholarship," Miss Parker said, sounding stunned. "For an entire year, anonymous donor." He stared at the phone like it had grown legs. "Did they say who?" "No, just that they'd met Naomi this morning and she reminded them of someone they loved." He hung up, heart racing. Talia Ford. He Googled her that night. The moment her photo popped up next to a headline, Ford Tech CEO Talia Ford donates millions to child education, he nearly dropped his phone. Billionaire. He'd spilled coffee on an actual billionaire. And somehow, she didn't seem to mind. Oliver stacked the last of his tools into the rusted truck bed just as the sun dipped behind the scaffolding. The day had been long, brutally long, but his mind hadn't once left the woman in the cafe, Talia Ford. He hadn't been able to shake her name. Not during the drywall installation, not during the lunch break he skipped, not even when his coworker nearly dropped a bucket of paint off the third floor. Every time the image of her face surfaced, cool, composed, and oddly warm beneath all that elegance, he felt like someone had hit him with a 2x4. He hadn't even known she was watching, but someone had clearly been watching. A fully paid preschool scholarship. That wasn't the kind of thing that happened to guys like him, and yet it had. He checked the back seat where Naomi was fast asleep, her pink lunchbox clutched like a treasure chest. He adjusted the mirror, catching the fading smear of dried paint on his jaw. He hadn't had time to stop home, let alone clean up. If he had to be honest, he was still wearing the same shirt from yesterday. He drove in silence, the city flashing by in streaks of amber and steel, until he pulled into the cracked driveway of the duplex he rented. His neighbor's dog barked from behind the fence, and the porch light flickered the way it always did, like it couldn't decide if it was dying or just bored. Inside, Naomi stirred while he unlocked the door with one hand and carried her with the other. "Daddy," she mumbled. "Yeah, honey." "We're home." Her head dropped back onto his shoulder, already asleep again. He laid her on the couch gently, covering her with the faded quilt his mother had sewn before she passed. Then he stood there for a moment, just staring at her tiny face, her fingers still holding a corner of the lunchbox strap like it was a lifeline. He should have felt relief. The preschool tuition had been suffocating him for months. But instead, he felt unsettled, like someone had opened a door he wasn't sure he wanted to walk through. Because people like Talia Ford didn't just hand out money without reason. And they definitely didn't sit down for coffee with single dads who showed up looking like they'd slept in a toolbox. He shook the thought off and went to the kitchen. The fridge protested when he opened it, groaning like it knew it had nothing to offer. He pulled out half a sandwich, grabbed a beer, and sat at the small table where bills were stacked in uneven piles and a crayon drawing of a unicorn hung from a bent magnet. He stared at the drawing for a long time. The knock came around 8. He opened the door holding a wrench, just in case, and nearly dropped it when he saw her. Talia stood on his porch wearing jeans and a black coat, her hair down, soft waves brushing her shoulders. She held a small bag in one hand and something that looked suspiciously like a pie in the other. "This is going to sound insane," she said before he could speak, "but I was in the neighborhood, and I figured if I'm going to fund your kid's education, I should probably learn her favorite color." He blinked. "You drove across the city to ask Naomi about her favorite color, also to apologize." "For not telling you who I was." He stepped aside slowly, still gripping the wrench. "You brought a pie, it's apple. I wasn't sure if you liked cherry." He stared at her. "Do you always show up at strangers' houses with baked goods and financial aid packages?" "Only when they spill scalding beverages on me," she said, stepping inside. She looked around, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the mismatched furniture, the single shelf of books. But she didn't make a face. Didn't flinch, she just set the pie down, then the bag, and turned to face him. "I wasn't trying to make you feel obligated," she said quietly. "Naomi reminded me of someone I miss every day." He didn't ask who. He saw it in her face, the kind of quiet ache that didn't need explaining. "Thank you," he said instead, "for what you did. But you didn't have to come here." "Maybe not," she replied. "But I wanted to." You looked surprised, and I wanted to see if that was fear. Or just shock. "I thought you were going to sue me," she laughed, the sound softer than it had been at the cafe. "I did think about it, but then your daughter told me I looked like a princess and I figured I owed you a pass." He finally relaxed enough to set the wrench on the counter. "Do you want to sit down?" he offered. "I mean, it's not much, but I can heat up leftover spaghetti, or we could just eat the pie." I think pie sounds perfect, she said. He brought 2 plates, and she pulled forks from the bag she'd brought because of course she'd thought of that. They sat at the table, knees almost touching, the silence stretching in a way that didn't feel awkward. So, she said between bites, what made you name her Naomi? He looked at his daughter asleep on the couch, then back at Talia. Her mom picked it. She loved the name. Thought it sounded strong. Talia nodded. She's not around? No, she passed. Few months after Naomi turned 2, for a moment she didn't speak. Then, I'm sorry, he shrugged, but the weight of it never left his shoulders. It's been a lot. But we get by. Talia traced the edge of her fork against the plate. You're doing more than getting by. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something folded in an envelope. She slid it across the table. I'm opening a new community initiative, she said. Funding trades programs, apprenticeships. I want people who know what they're doing running it. People who have lived it. I want you to be part of it. He frowned. You want me to? What? Be a face for it. I want you to help design it. Build it with me. You know what makes something real. You know what people need. He stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. I don't want charity, he said. It's not charity, she replied. It's a job, a very well-paid one, by the way. And it could change everything. He looked at her, this impossibly composed woman who could probably buy half the city, and saw something behind her eyes. Not pity, not guilt, hope. He opened the envelope, and his life began to tilt. Talia sat on the edge of the conference table, legs crossed, tapping a pen against her knee with a rhythm she didn't recognize. The boardroom was glass-walled, perched high above the city, the skyline stretching in every direction like a jeweled crown. But her mind wasn't on the view. Her eyes were on the door. He's late, said Gregson, her coo, glancing at his watch. Again? He's not late, she said, voice low but firm. He's not here yet. He's not like the others, Talia. He doesn't come from this world. You can't just toss him a 6-figure salary and expect him to fall into step. I'm not expecting that, she replied, standing now. I'm asking him to help build something that matters. If that makes him hesitate, good. It means he's not doing it for the wrong reasons. Gregson opened his mouth, but the elevator chimed before he could speak. Oliver stepped in, dressed in dark navy slacks and a shirt that actually fit him, his hair combed back with a hint of effort. He still looked like a man who belonged more on a construction site than a boardroom floor, but there was something quietly grounded about him, like he knew exactly who he was and had no interest in pretending otherwise. He didn't apologize for being late. He walked straight up to the table, met Talia's eyes, and said, I read the proposal. You really want to do this? Yes, she said. I do. Then I'll do it. But I want to be involved from the ground up. No lip service, no pretty brochures for donors, real programs. Real people, her mouth turned up slightly. That's exactly what I want, Oliver. Gregson folded his arms, unconvinced. You understand the scale of this project. It's not about patching drywall and painting walls. This is national. This is millions of dollars. Oliver turned to him without blinking. And the people you're trying to reach, they're the ones I've been sweating next to for years. I know what works. That's why I'm here. Gregson didn't respond. Talia didn't need him to. She walked to Oliver, handing him a folder. You'll work directly with me. Weekly strategy meetings, site visits. You'll have a team, but I want your voice front and center. He looked down at the folder, then back at her. You always move this fast, only when something's worth chasing. He held her gaze a second longer before tucking the folder under his arm. Then I'll keep up. After the meeting, she walked him to the elevator, the air between them thick with something unspoken. You wore sleeves today, she said, a teasing glint in her voice. Yeah, he said. Didn't want to terrify your board with my tan lines. You clean up well. Don't get used to it. She pressed the elevator button, then looked up at him. We're heading to the first site next week, in Chicago. I'll need you there, he nodded. I'll make it work. I'll find someone to stay with Naomi. I could help with that. I'll find someone, he said again, gently but firmly. She didn't push. He stepped inside the elevator, his eyes not leaving hers until the doors slid shut. That night, Oliver tucked Naomi in with her favorite stuffed owl and sat on the edge of her bed longer than usual. Daddy, she whispered, half asleep. Do you still work with hammers? Not as many, he whispered back. But I think I'll be building something even bigger now, she yawned. Like a spaceship, something like that. He watched her eyes flutter closed, her tiny fingers curling against the blanket. Then he stood, walked to the kitchen, and stared at the folder again. He'd read it twice already, but it still didn't seem real. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up to the curb just as he stepped outside. A driver opened the door without a word, and Oliver exhaled slowly before getting in. The jet was waiting at the private terminal, sleek and silver with no logos, only tinted windows and quiet opulence. Talia stood at the base of the steps, clipboard in hand, dressed in a steel gray coat and dark heels that somehow didn't make a sound against the tarmac. "You're early," she said. "I didn't want to risk traffic." She handed him a tablet. "These are the first 3 program outlines. I want your feedback on all of them before we land." He walked up the steps beside her. "You always this demanding, only with people I respect." Inside the jet, it was another world: leather seats, polished wood, a tray of croissants that probably cost more than his weekly groceries. He sat across from her, trying not to look impressed. She glanced over the tablet as he skimmed. "You didn't ask how I found your address. I figured if you wanted to hurt me, you wouldn't have shown up with pie." She laughed softly. "I'm not used to people not asking questions. I've got enough of my own to answer right now." They worked in silence for a while, the hum of the engines the only sound. Then she leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. "You know," she said quietly, "I've spent years building things that look good on paper. Partnerships, mergers, metrics, but I've never built something that made me feel proud." He looked at her, really looked at her. "Then why start now?" She opened her eyes, met his. "Because you reminded me that it's still possible." Neither of them spoke after that. The flight was short, but it changed something. By the time they landed, the tension had shifted, less guarded, more aware. Chicago greeted them with wind and glass towers. The site visit was a whirlwind: hard hats, blueprints, a tour of the unfinished facility. Oliver took the lead, questioning the foreman, pointing out potential safety issues, suggesting layout changes that had the executives scrambling to take notes. Talia watched him the whole time, her expression unreadable. When the day ended, she pulled him aside. "You were brilliant back there." "I just said what made sense." "No," she said. "You said what mattered." He looked at her, then down at her gloved hands. "You ever build anything with your own 2 hands?" She shook her head. "Then come by the site tomorrow. I'll show you how to pour a foundation." She arched a brow. "You think I can't handle it?" "I think you wear shoes that cost more than my rent." "But I'd like to see you try." She smiled then, not polite or poised something real. "Deal." As they walked back to the car, she brushed his arm lightly with hers. Not intentionally, not obviously, but he felt it, and he didn't move away. The morning air bit sharper than usual as Oliver stood outside the Chicago build site, breath curling in the cold. He adjusted his work gloves and glanced toward the security gate just as a sleek black sedan pulled up. The passenger door opened, and Talia stepped out, not in heels or tailored slacks this time, but in worn jeans, a navy hoodie layered beneath a weatherproof jacket, and boots that looked like they hadn't been bought for style. "I figured if I'm going to learn how to pour a foundation," she said, pulling her hair back into a low ponytail, "I should dress for the occasion." He handed her a hard hat without a word and led her across the gravel. The other workers paused, murmuring, recognizing her despite the casual clothes. Oliver shot them a sharp look, and they returned to their tasks, though not without a few curious glances. "You're not going to give a grand speech," Talia teased, walking beside him. "I don't give speeches," he said. "I show up, I work, and I don't waste anyone's time." "That's why I trust you with this project," she said. "You don't posture." He stopped at the edge of the foundation frame, already lined with steel reinforcements. "You'll want to stay clear of the wet pour, but I've got some scrap boards you can help set. It's nothing glamorous." "I'm not here for glamour." He handed her a pair of gloves. "Then let's get to it." They worked without fanfare, side by side, her movements tentative at first but growing more confident. She listened carefully when he explained the leveling process, asked questions that revealed she was absorbing more than just the surface details. Her nails chipped. Her gloves got muddy, and still she didn't stop. Later, as they rinsed their hands at the outdoor sink behind the tool shed, she leaned against the wall, water dripping from her wrists. I haven't done anything like this in my life, she said. Not even close. You could have fooled me, he replied, turning off the tap. You didn't complain once. I wanted to, she admitted, pulling her hair free from the band, but I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it. He studied her for a moment, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't need to prove anything to me. I'm not trying to prove something, she said. I'm trying to understand what it feels like to build something permanent, something that doesn't vanish when the market shifts. He nodded, then tilted his head. You ever think about what this will look like a year from now? After the ribbon cuttings and press releases. All the time, she said. I think about the people who'll walk through those doors, not knowing who funded it or who laid the concrete. Just knowing they've got a shot at something better. He didn't reply, but the look in his eyes shifted warmer, less guarded. They returned to the temporary office trailer where he showed her updated blueprints for the next 2 sites. She sat on the edge of the desk, flipping through the pages. Your notes are good, she said, but you're underselling the impact. I don't like fluff, he said, arms folded. You don't need fluff, she said. You need truth. And the truth is, this kind of work changes people. You mean like it's changing you, he asked. She didn't answer right away. I didn't expect this, she said finally. Any of it. The project you, Naomi, he stiffened slightly. Are you saying this is too much? No, she said quickly. I'm saying it's more than I planned for, and I'm not used to things I can't plan. He stepped forward. I need to know something, Talia. Are you doing this because you believe in it or because you believe in me? She didn't flinch. Both. That night, back in the penthouse suite of the hotel Ford Tech had booked for her, she couldn't sleep. Not because of the meetings or the press calls or the stack of contracts waiting on her desk, but because her mind kept replaying the way he'd looked at her across that cement frame. Not like a billionaire, not like a CEO, like a woman. She picked up her phone, stared at the screen, then set it down again. Instead, she called the front desk and asked them to arrange something for the next morning. The following day, Oliver woke to a knock on his hotel door. Naomi was curled beside him in the bed, having flown in with his sister late the night before. He opened the door quietly and found a hotel staff member holding a large envelope. For Mr. Brooks, the man said, bowing slightly. Inside was an invitation. Heavy cardstock embossed in silver. It read, Ford Tech Gala honoring community innovation, black tie required guest of honor. Oliver Brooks. He stared at it for a long time. When he brought it down to the hotel lobby later, he found Talia already waiting, dressed in a charcoal coat and sunglasses, sipping tea. You want me to go to this? He asked, holding up the invitation. You deserve to be seen, she said. The work we're doing, it's happening because of you. I don't own a tux, he said. Then I guess I'll have to fix that. He shook his head. You don't need to throw me a party. It's not just for you, she said. It's for every person who's worked their whole life without ever being recognized for it. But yes, you'll be at the center of it, because you built something from the ground up. And I think that deserves a spotlight. He looked away, uncomfortable. I'm not good at being the center of attention, she stepped closer. Then just look at me, I'll be right there. The gala was held 5 nights later at one of the most exclusive venues in the city. Chandeliers sparkled above a sea of black ties and gowns, while a live jazz band played in the corner. Reporters hovered near the entrance, snapping photos of arrivals. Oliver stood in front of the mirror in the dressing room Ford Tech had reserved for him, tugging at the collar of his tuxedo. You look like James Bond, Naomi whispered, beaming beside him in her pale blue dress. He reached down and kissed her forehead. You think, way cooler, she said, because you build stuff. When they entered the ballroom, the crowd turned, people whispered, people stared. But Talia was waiting at the top of the staircase, in a dark sapphire gown that shimmered like glass under the lights. She didn't wait for him to approach. She walked to him, took his hand and said, You ready? No, he said. But I trust you. She smiled, not poised or polished, but genuinely moved. Then we'll do it together. They walked in side by side, the music swelled, the lights dimmed, and for the first time in his life, Oliver Brooks felt like he wasn't just surviving, he was seen. He was wanted. He was loved, and as he looked down at the woman beside him, sharp, fearless, and impossibly real, he knew one thing for sure. He hadn't just built a foundation for others. He'd built something for himself too, something that would last. The last of the gala guests filtered out as the band played its final song. Waitstaff moved quietly through the room, clearing champagne flutes and folded napkins. Soft laughter echoed from the far end of the ballroom, but Oliver and Talia stood still near the terrace doors, the city glittering behind them. Talia exhaled, her hand resting lightly on his chest as she looked up at him. "You know, I've been to dozens of these events. But this is the first one I didn't want to leave." Oliver brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "Because it was about something real, because you were in it." Outside, the terrace was empty, the marble floor still damp from the earlier rain. They stepped out together, the cool air brushing against their skin. Talia leaned against the railing, her gown catching the light in ripples of deep blue. "I never thought I'd want this," she said. "A partner, a family. I built a world where I didn't need anyone." "You don't need anyone," Oliver said, standing beside her. "But that doesn't mean you don't deserve someone." She looked at him, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "I've spent years making decisions for everyone else, for shareholders, for boardrooms, for legacy, but it's the first decision I've made that wasn't about any of that." "Then let's build something that's ours," he said. "Not a business, not a foundation, a life." She tilted her head. "You mean that?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught, but he didn't open it right away. "I didn't buy this because I thought it would fix something. I bought it because every morning I wake up I want you there. Not as the CEO. Not as the woman who changed my career. As the woman who gave Naomi back her laughter, and gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost." He opened the box. A simple ring. No diamonds, no flash, just a platinum band shaped like an infinity knot. Talia's hand trembled slightly as he took it in his. "Yes," she whispered before he could even ask. "Yes, Oliver." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that silenced the city behind them. They married 3 months later in a quiet ceremony at the community center they had just finished building together. Naomi wore a crown of daisies and insisted on walking Talia down the aisle. The guests were a mix of construction workers, nonprofit partners, and children from the first scholarship program they'd launched. No press, no speeches. Just vows exchanged under strings of backyard lights, and the scent of fresh concrete still clinging to the soil. Talia wore a dress she'd chosen without a stylist. Oliver wore cufflinks she had engraved with Naomi's initials. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Naomi clapped so hard she knocked over the mason jar of wildflowers she'd been holding. They spent their first night as a family in the small 2-story house Oliver had started renovating weeks before the wedding. It wasn't finished yet, but the kitchen had working appliances, the upstairs had 3 bedrooms, and the backyard had enough space for Naomi to plant the apple tree she insisted would one day grow a swing. Talia stood at the threshold, barefoot, holding a mug of tea as Oliver carried Naomi upstairs. "You know," she said as he returned, "I used to think happiness looked like a penthouse and a board seat. And now," she walked into his arms, resting her head against his shoulder. "Now it looks like mismatched curtains and a kid's laughter echoing down the hallway." He kissed the top of her head. "Good, because that's all I've got to offer." "You're wrong," she said, meeting his eyes. "You offered me everything I never had the courage to ask for. Years passed, but some things didn't change." Naomi grew taller, her questions more complex, her drawings more detailed. Talia stepped back from Ford Tech, appointing a new CEO and staying on as chairwoman, spending her time between the foundation and the life she'd built with Oliver. He continued to oversee the construction programs, teaching young apprentices how to read blueprints and swing hammers with precision. They still danced in the kitchen on Saturday mornings, still argued over paint colors and bedtime routines, still held hands at community meetings even when the cameras were gone. On the 5th anniversary of the first program they launched together, they returned to the Chicago site where it all began. The facility now housed workshops, classrooms, and a childcare center that bore Naomi's name. As they stood at the entrance, watching the next group of students arrive, Talia leaned into Oliver's side. "You know what I realized," she said. "What's that?" This wasn't about a second chance, it was about the right one. He looked down at her, brushing his thumb against her wedding band. Then let's keep choosing it, every day. And they did, not because they had to, but because love, once built on something real, only gets stronger.